Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Wednesday, the 30th of November. Glad to have you here today. I would like to talk to you a little bit about GPS. If you listen to CNN, there's a gentleman, I always hear him on Sundays when I'm driving between my churches, and he talks about the global, what does he call it? It's GPS, Global Public Square, I think it is. And he just sort of talks about things that are happening in the world that week. Of course, there's the GPS in your car, which I have learned that I cannot live without. Doing a lot of driving to Edmonton. So if you don't know my geography, I am an Anglican priest and I serve in the Diocese of Edmonton in Alberta, Canada for the Anglican Church of Canada. And my parish is Dayspring Parish, Dayspring Ministries. And it's three places, the village of Edgerton, St. Mary's Church, and the small town of Vermilion at St. Saviour's, and the small town of Wainwright, St. Thomas. And we're sort of in the southeastern corner of our diocese, pretty close to the Saskatchewan border. And it's about 2.25 hours away from Edmonton. And I used to be a killer with maps. I could actually read a map. I could get myself places, no problem. GPS has made me lazy. I plug my phone in, I plug in the address I want to go, and it tells me exactly what to do. And I'm getting to the point where I'm realizing, no matter how good I was with a map, Edmonton is not a city in which I could drive. It's like Toronto or Ottawa. Couldn't do it. Hamilton's even worse with one-way streets. I could not do that without a GPS, so I'm glad to have them. Well, on October 25th, reading from our Daily Bread, this is what I use, one of the resources I use for my daily office or my daily prayers, it came across this passage, this little devotional called Trusting God's Foresight. And it's talking about a man and his wife who are driving in an unfamiliar location. And the husband noticed that his GPS directions, which had been working really well, suddenly took them off a 4-lane highway and put them on a road that ran like a dirt road that ran parallel to the highway. And he's like, well, we're doing well here. We're getting close to our destination. But the GPS kept saying, no, reroute, go this way. So he trusted the GPS and it took him, and they were humming along, and they could not figure out for the life of them why they were on this road, until all of a sudden, further up the highway beside them, they could see that there was massive construction, and they went sailing on by, and all those people who were in a hurry on their way to work, where they're doing, were stuck in this construction. And the GPS took them on a path because the GPS could see what they could not see. What made sense to them, based on what they could see, the GPS knew wasn't going to make sense to them, or the offense for them, and gave them new instructions. It's like God's positioning system, I think. It's that trusting God to send us where we need to be. And if we trust God, if we follow the instructions as they're given, we'll be in good shape. Now, there come times when the GPS instructions don't make a lot of sense, or we are not paying complete attention to them. My sister and my dad, I doubt if they're going to watch this, but if they do, I'll get phone calls because they'll be angry with me. But we were all supposed to go to, the three of us were supposed to go to Edinburgh, Scotland back in 2018. And I was living in Halifax. They were living in London, Ontario. So they were going to fly to Toronto. I was going to fly from Halifax to Toronto, get on the plane with them, and fly over to Edinburgh. Halifax did not fly directly to Edinburgh. Otherwise, I just would have met them there. Well, long story short, my plane was delayed. And when I got to Toronto, I could see their plane leaving to go to Edinburgh. So I had to get on a plane to go to Heathrow, and that's in England, and then go from Heathrow to Edinburgh. And I got there a good probably 14 or 15 hours after they did, having already been in an airport many hours before they were. I was extremely tired. But when they got there, there was a great story to be told, because they were both exhausted and sleeping, because they rented a car, and they rented a car with GPS. Neither of them had ever used GPS before. And I thought this was kind of funny, because my sister's a high school geography teacher. You'd think she'd be able to figure this out. But they were following the prompts from the GPS, and they swear they were following them correctly. But this GPS apparently took them down a cow path. And I'm not exaggerating. It had them turn off a paved road to go down a road that had ruts and grass between the ruts and turned into a cow path. Now, the whole time they did this, the GPS kept saying rerouting, 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 and they kept on going. You'd think that they would have stopped, but after a while they did. They turned around and they got back on board, and they turned off the GPS and spent an hour trying to figure out where they were going. Finally got to where they were. We re-plugged in the GPS later because we realized we were going to be driving all over Scotland and really did need some help. And it turns out, I think, that the problem was that they were not listening to the GPS. They were so worried about driving on the wrong side of the road, they weren't actually listening to what the GPS was telling them. And I think, for me anyway, I don't know about you, but for me, that has been the story of my life. So many times in my life, I have ended up back in the same place, or I've ended up down a cow path I didn't necessarily need to be down. I have ended up in small towns where I didn't know where I was, and there was no gas station to ask directions because I didn't follow the instructions. Sometimes it was the GPS. I don't always pay attention to how many meters. It might say turn right in 250 meters, and I don't pay attention and turn right the next stoplight. That was only 150 meters, and then I end up, rerouting again. There have been times when I have written my instructions on a map, and I've just missed seeing a turn off, a street name or something. And because I'm not paying attention to the instructions I have been given, I have ended up in some very interesting places. Now, granted, some of the experiences I have had because I wasn't paying attention have been absolutely phenomenal. And I am a big believer that God actually does use the circumstances we're in for good. And there have been very few times when I have ended up lost that something else that was good didn't come of it. I've learned something, I've seen something, I've met people, I've had more time to think or ask questions or to pray because I got lost. I've always ended up back where I needed to be, eventually, like sometimes really eventually. But, so I do believe that God does, take advantage of those situations where we mess up to help us figure something else out. But for the most part, if I just pay attention to the instructions I've been given, it all works out. If I pay attention to my GPS, I end up where I need to be, and generally on time. If I pay attention to what I believe God is calling me to do, then it's all good. It's all good. My GPS gets me there. And sometimes there have been like those moments, that hunch you get, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like, I really, really should turn right here instead of going straight. I think I'm going to go this way instead of that. There are times that I know that I've missed out on things like construction or an accident up ahead because I have taken a different route when something has said to me, go this way. And I've listened. I've heeded that something. I think we all have that from time to time, whatever we call it. I call it the Holy Spirit. Sometimes when I do it and it doesn't work out or it's not better, maybe it's just indigestion. But for the most part, I have found that if I pay attention to that thought that pops into the back of my head that says, you really need to do this, you really need to phone this person now, you really need to go and do this, that has been the Holy Spirit, God speaking to me and saying, here's your next prompt on your GPS. So as you go about your day, as you go about your life, I pray that you will be able to recognize those moments when your GPS is saying, I know it sounds strange, but how about you take this cow path over here? Or how about you turn right or take the road parallel to the highway? Because in the end, it might just help you out. Maybe you'll just learn something new. But listening to God, listening to those instructions, paying attention to what's happening in our world, in our lives, can really, really help us out. For me, it's God. For you, I don't know. But pay attention to those gut feelings. Pay attention to those instructions you get. Pay attention to where you're going and pay attention to the journey and how you get there. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.